My name is Elena Martinez, and I was 26 when I thought I'd landed the opportunity of a lifetime. Fresh out of UCLA with a degree in event management and a mountain of student debt, I was desperate to prove myself in Los Angeles' cutthroat luxury event planning world. The job posting seemed too good to be true. Assistant to premier wedding planner, $45K plus benefits, opportunity to work with A-list clientele. What they didn't mention was that my boss, Celine Hartley, would make my life a living hell from day one. Celine owned Hartley Events, a company that planned weddings for tech billionaires, Hollywood royalty, and old money families who thought nothing of dropping $500,000 on a single night. She was everything I wasn't: tall, blonde, polished, and absolutely ruthless. Her office walls were covered with photos of her posing with celebrities at events I later discovered I had actually planned. On my first day, she looked me up and down like I was something she'd scraped off her Louboutin heel. "Let me be clear, Elena," she said, not bothering to look up from her phone. "I only hire people who know their place. You're here to make me look good, not to have opinions or creative input. Understood?" I should have walked out right then, but I had rent to pay and dreams to chase. "Understood," I replied, swallowing my pride along with my words. The next 6 months were a masterclass in psychological warfare disguised as a job. Celine would give me impossible deadlines, then berate me when I worked through the night to meet them. She'd send me to vendor meetings, let me negotiate deals and build relationships, then swoop in at the last minute to take credit for everything. "Oh, Elena just handles the paperwork," she'd tell clients with a dismissive wave. "I'm the creative vision behind everything you see." But the worst part wasn't the stolen credit. It was watching her treat other people the same way. Maria, our housekeeper, was an undocumented immigrant from Guatemala who worked harder than anyone I'd ever met. Celine paid her cash under the table, half of what she should have earned, and constantly threatened to make a phone call if Maria ever complained. "These people should be grateful I give them work at all," Celine once told me, not caring that Maria was within earshot. "They're replaceable, just like you." I started documenting everything. Not because I had some master plan for revenge. I just wanted to protect myself. Screenshots of emails, recordings of meetings where she'd admit to tax evasion, copies of the fake contracts she used to underpay workers. I told myself it was just insurance. Looking back, maybe karma was already setting the stage. In late October, Celine landed the biggest contract of her career, a charity wedding gala for the Westmore Foundation. The bride was Rebecca Westmore, daughter of tech mogul Jonathan Westmore, and she was marrying her college sweetheart in what was being billed as the wedding of the century. The catch? It wasn't just a wedding. It was a fundraising gala for children's literacy programs. Celebrity guests, media coverage, corporate sponsors, and a guest list that read like the Forbes 400. The budget was $250,000, but the real value was in the publicity. Success here could launch Hartley Events into the stratosphere. "This is our chance to go national," Celine told me, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "I want everything perfect. No mistakes, no shortcuts, no excuses." For once, we were aligned on something. What followed was the most intense 6 weeks of my life. I lived and breathed that gala. I was at the office by 6 a.m. and rarely left before midnight. Weekends ceased to exist. I survived on coffee, takeout, and pure determination. I designed the entire theme myself. A night under the stars, with celestial decorations, a midnight blue and gold color scheme, and fairy lights that would transform the Beverly Hills Hotel ballroom into something magical. I sourced flowers from 3 different states, coordinated with celebrity chefs, managed the media timeline, and wrote all the press materials. But the real challenge wasn't the logistics. It was managing Celine's ego while doing all the actual work. She'd swoop into meetings I'd set up, interrupt presentations I'd prepared, and somehow make every conversation about her vision and her expertise. Vendors who'd worked with me for weeks would suddenly start addressing only her. Sponsors who'd built relationships with me would somehow forget I existed when Celine walked into the room. "You're getting too comfortable," she warned me one evening as I was finalizing the seating chart. "Remember, you work for me, not with me. Start acting like it." The worst part was watching her practice her interviews. She'd rehearse answers about her creative process, her attention to detail, her ability to bring dreams to life. She knew every detail because I'd briefed her on everything, but she spoke about the gala like it had sprung fully formed from her brilliant mind. "What if they ask about your team?" I ventured during one practice session. She looked at me like I'd suggested she share credit with the janitor. "My team follows my vision," she said coldly. "They're not the story. I am." 2 weeks before the gala, the media attention reached fever pitch. Celine was on 3 morning shows, did interviews with 5 magazines, and somehow managed to get a feature story in the LA Times Society section. I watched every interview from my desk, seeing months of my work attributed to her creative genius and unparalleled attention to detail. She talked about staying up all night perfecting the lighting design. I'd done that. Her personal relationships with vendors. I'd built those. And her innovative approach to charity event planning, based entirely on my research and proposals. The final insult came during her interview with Hollywood Today. When the reporter asked about her inspiration for the celestial theme, Celine launched into a story about a trip to Santorini where she'd been struck by divine inspiration while watching the stars. I'd pitched that exact theme to her in a PowerPoint presentation 6 weeks earlier, complete with inspiration photos from Santorini that I'd found online. But the absolute worst moment came when they asked if she had any advice for young people trying to break into event planning. "Surround yourself with people who understand that there's only room for one star," she said with that practiced smile. "I've built my success by maintaining complete creative control and never settling for anything less than perfection." I wanted to throw my laptop across the room. 3 days before the gala, Celine called me into her office with a concerned expression. "Elena, we need to talk about your role at the event," she began, her tone suggesting bad news was coming. "Given the high-profile nature of this gala and the media attention, I think it's best if you maintain a more behind-the-scenes presence." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. "It means you'll be working the event, not attending it. Coordinate with vendors, handle any issues that come up, make sure everything runs smoothly so I can focus on our guests and the media." 6 weeks of 16-hour days, and she wanted me to work the event like hired help. "Celine, I've been the primary planner on this event. Shouldn't I at least be introduced to the sponsors and—" "Elena," her voice cut like ice. "This is not a negotiation. You're staff, not a guest. Dress appropriately and remember your place." That night, I called my best friend Maya, sobbing with frustration. "Quit," she said immediately. "Send an email to every vendor and sponsor explaining exactly who did the work, then walk away." "I can't," I whispered. "I need this job, and she'll destroy my reputation in this industry. She has connections everywhere." "Then what are you going to do?" I stared at my reflection in my apartment's cracked mirror, still wearing yesterday's clothes, my eyes red from exhaustion and tears. "I'm going to show up and do my job," I said finally, and hope that someday karma catches up with her. The day of the gala, I arrived at the Beverly Hills Hotel at 2 p.m. for a 7 p.m. event. The ballroom looked absolutely magical. My vision brought to life through sheer force of will and attention to every minute detail. The celestial theme was perfect. Thousands of tiny lights created a starry sky effect. Midnight blue linens complemented gold charger plates, and the centerpieces I'd designed looked like they'd been plucked from a fairy tale. For a moment, seeing it all come together, I felt proud despite everything. Then Celine arrived. She swept in wearing a custom Valentino gown that probably cost more than my annual salary, immediately beginning to direct vendors who'd been working with me all day. I watched her take credit for design decisions I'd made, corrections I'd implemented, and last-minute details I'd coordinated. "Elena," she called out, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "I need you to change. That dress is too formal for your role tonight." I looked down at my simple black dress. Professional, appropriate, and the nicest thing I owned. "I brought something more suitable for you," she continued, producing a black polo shirt and pants. Much more appropriate for staff. The humiliation was intentional and public. Vendors, hotel staff, and early arriving photographers all witnessed the exchange. Some looked away uncomfortably. Others seemed to be enjoying the show. "Celine, I don't think—" "It wasn't a request," she interrupted, her smile sharp as a blade. "Change now or leave. Your choice." I wanted to quit right there. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her and walk out with whatever dignity I had left. But I thought about my student loans, my rent, and the fact that burning this bridge might mean never working in events again. So I changed. By 7 p.m., the ballroom was filled with the most powerful people in Los Angeles. I recognized tech CEOs, movie stars, politicians, and socialites whose faces I'd seen on magazine covers. They mingled and laughed, champagne flutes in hand, completely unaware that the woman they were praising for the beautiful event was making the actual planner serve drinks like a caterer. "Elena," Celine whispered as I passed her carrying a tray of champagne. "Make sure you smile. These people can spot unhappy staff from across the room." The evening was a parade of small humiliations. Guests who'd spoken to me during planning meetings looked right through me now that I was in a uniform. Vendors I'd worked closely with avoided eye contact, unwilling to acknowledge our professional relationship in front of Celine. But the worst part was listening to Celine accept praise for work she hadn't done. "The lighting design is absolutely inspired," I heard one guest tell her. "How did you come up with such a unique concept?" "Well," Celine replied, launching into the same Santorini story she'd told the reporter, "I believe true creativity comes from personal experience and an eye for the extraordinary." I gripped my tray so tightly I thought the glasses might shatter. As the evening progressed, I noticed something strange. There was a man in a gray suit who seemed to be paying more attention to Celine than to the festivities. He wasn't mingling like the other guests, and he kept a notebook in his hand, occasionally jotting things down. At first, I thought he might be a journalist, but something about his demeanor seemed more official. Around 9 p.m., while refilling champagne glasses in the VIP area, I overheard a conversation that would change everything. Celine was talking to the man in the gray suit, and she was clearly drunk on champagne and praise. "You know what my secret is?" she was saying, her voice carrying that particular arrogance that comes with alcohol and an audience. "I underpay my entire staff. Half of them are undocumented, so they can't complain. I could get rid of them tomorrow and no one would notice." She laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Besides, I always make sure the contracts are fake. The IRS doesn't know what they don't see, if you know what I mean." The man said nothing, just smiled and nodded, continuing to write in his notebook. "Take my assistant, for example," Celine continued, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "She did all the grunt work on this event, but do you think she deserves credit? Please. I'm the one with the vision, the connections, the reputation. She's just support staff." I felt my face burning with humiliation and rage. But something about the man's reaction bothered me. He wasn't laughing along or looking shocked by her admissions. He was just listening and writing. "The charity angle is brilliant too," Celine went on. "These people will pay anything if they think it's for a good cause. Half the money goes to administrative costs anyway. It's not like anyone audits these things carefully." That's when I realized what was happening. The man wasn't a guest. He was an investigator. And Celine had just confessed to tax fraud, labor violations, and charity fraud, while I stood 3 feet away with a tray of champagne flutes. The evening was about to get very interesting. I backed away from the VIP area, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The man in the gray suit was still listening to Celine's drunken confessions, his pen moving steadily across his notebook. I needed to get away before she noticed me eavesdropping, but I also couldn't tear myself away from what was unfolding. That's when I saw her. A woman in a navy blue suit stood near the ballroom entrance, speaking quietly into a phone. She wasn't dressed like a guest. Her outfit was too conservative, too professional, and she kept glancing toward the VIP area where Celine was still talking. I moved closer, pretending to collect empty glasses from nearby tables. "Yes, we have everything we need," the woman was saying into her phone. She just admitted to tax fraud, labor violations, and charity fraud on camera. The IRS is going to have a field day with this. Camera? I glanced around the ballroom and noticed what I'd missed before. Several people who weren't quite fitting in with the crowd. They were positioned strategically around the room, all with clear sightlines to the VIP area. Some had drinks in their hands, others were engaged in conversation, but they were all watching, all listening. This wasn't just an investigation. It was a coordinated takedown. I felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Celine had finally gone too far, and karma was about to collect its debt. I slipped into the hallway outside the ballroom, needing a moment to process what I'd witnessed. My hands were shaking as I set down my tray and tried to think clearly. How long had they been investigating her? Had they been watching the company while I was documenting all her illegal activities? Did they know about the fake contracts, the underpaid workers, the tax evasion? Then I remembered something that made my blood run cold. All those files I'd been keeping, all the evidence I'd collected. If they searched her office, they'd find my documentation. Would they think I was complicit? Would I be arrested alongside her? I was spiraling into panic when I heard footsteps behind me. "Excuse me, miss?" I turned to find the woman in the navy suit standing behind me, her expression kind but serious. "I'm Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI," she said quietly, showing me her badge. "We've been conducting an investigation into Hartley events for the past 3 months. I believe you're Elena Martinez?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "You're not in trouble," she said immediately, clearly reading the fear on my face. "In fact, you may have inadvertently helped our case. We know about the documentation you've been keeping. How do you—" "Ms. Martinez, when someone reports potential labor violations and tax fraud to the IRS, we investigate. A former employee of Ms. Hartley's contacted us 6 months ago with some concerning allegations. Since then, we've been building a case." Maria. It had to be. Sweet, hard-working Maria, who'd finally found the courage to report what Celine had been doing. "We've been monitoring Ms. Hartley's communications, financial records, and business practices," Agent Chen continued. "Your documentation corroborated much of what we'd already discovered, but what we really needed was for her to incriminate herself on record." "The man in the gray suit? Agent Rodriguez. He's been wearing a wire all evening. Ms. Hartley just confessed to federal crimes in front of 200 witnesses, and we have it all on tape." I felt lightheaded. After 6 months of abuse, humiliation, and stolen credit, justice was finally coming for Celine Hartley. "What happens now?" I asked. Agent Chen checked her watch. "Now we wait for the signal. She's about to give her big speech to the crowd, and that's when we'll make our move." I returned to the ballroom just as Celine was taking the stage. She looked radiant in her designer gown, completely unaware that her world was about to crumble. The crowd quieted as she tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying across the room with practiced confidence. "Thank you all for joining us tonight for what I believe has been a truly magical evening." Applause filled the ballroom. I could see Agent Rodriguez in the crowd, his notebook now closed, his hand resting casually near his jacket pocket. "6 weeks ago, I had a vision," Celine continued, launching into her well-rehearsed speech. "I saw an evening that would combine the beauty of love with the power of giving back to our community. Tonight, That vision has become reality. The irony was almost too much to bear. She was taking credit for my vision, my work, my sleepless nights, while federal agents prepared to arrest her for crimes I'd helped document. The Westmore Foundation has raised over $300,000 tonight for children's literacy programs, she announced to enthusiastic applause. And it's all thanks to the generous support of our sponsors and the incredible work of my team at Hartley Events. For a split second, I thought she might actually acknowledge the people who'd made the evening possible. But then she continued. Of course, none of this would have been possible without my personal dedication to excellence and my commitment to bringing unique, unforgettable experiences to life. She raised her champagne glass high above her head. So here's to dreams realized, to the power of vision, and to... The ballroom light suddenly dimmed. Celine Hartley. The voice came from the back of the room, authoritative and clear. Agent Chen stepped forward, her badge visible in the stage lights. You are under federal investigation for tax fraud, labor violations, and charity fraud. Please step down from the stage. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Guests gasped and began murmuring. Photographers who'd been taking pictures of the speech suddenly had a much bigger story. Camera flashes lit up the room like lightning. Celine stood frozen on the stage, her champagne glass still raised, her face cycling through confusion, denial, and finally, terror. What is this? She stammered into the microphone. This is some kind of mistake. I'm hosting a charity event. Ms. Hartley, please step down from the stage voluntarily, Agent Chen repeated. That's when two more agents appeared from the crowd, including Agent Rodriguez. They moved toward the stage with calm professionalism, while the crowd watched in stunned silence. This is ridiculous. Celine's voice cracked with desperation. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm a respected businesswoman. You're under arrest, Agent Rodriguez said as he reached the stage. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The Miranda rights continued as they led her off the stage, but Celine wasn't listening. She was scanning the crowd, and when her eyes found mine, I saw something I'd never seen before. Pure, unadulterated fear. Elena, she screamed, pointing at me. It was Elena. She planned this. She's been plotting against me. The agents paused, and for a moment, I thought I might be arrested too. But Agent Chen simply looked at Celine with professional disdain. Ms. Hartley, your employee didn't betray you. You did that yourself, on camera in front of 200 witnesses while wearing a wire. The room erupted. Guests pulled out their phones. Reporters started making calls. And I watched my former boss's face crumble as the reality of her situation hit home. They led Celine out through the kitchen to avoid the media circus forming in the main lobby. As the door closed behind her, the ballroom exploded into conversation. Everyone was talking at once. Phones were ringing, and I could hear reporters already crafting their stories. The charity gala from hell, someone was saying. This is going to be front-page news. I stood there in my staff uniform, holding an empty champagne tray, watching the complete destruction of everything Celine had built. Her reputation, her business, her freedom, all gone in the span of 10 minutes. Rebecca Westmore, the bride whose celebration had turned into a crime scene, approached me with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, she said. I had no idea. Are you okay? I nodded, still too stunned to speak. My father wants to speak with you, she continued. He's horrified that Ms. Hartley was stealing from the charity. He wants to make sure you're taken care of. Taken care of. After 6 months of abuse and humiliation, someone was finally concerned about my welfare. The next morning, I found myself in an FBI field office, answering questions about my time at Hartley Events. Agent Chen sat across from me with a thick file that I realized contained months of my own documentation. You've been very thorough, she said. flipping through screenshots of emails and recorded conversations. Most people in your position would have been too scared to collect this kind of evidence. I was scared, I admitted. But I was also angry. She was hurting people who couldn't fight back. Maria Gonzalez speaks very highly of you, Agent Chen said. She mentioned that you were the only person at the company who treated her with respect. Is she okay? Will she be deported? Ms. Gonzalez is being granted whistleblower protection. She's also being helped with her immigration status. Her courage in coming forward made this entire investigation possible. I felt a wave of relief. Maria had been so brave, and now she was finally safe. What about me? I asked. Am I in trouble for not reporting this sooner? Agent Chen closed the file and looked at me seriously. Elena, you were a victim, not a perpetrator. You were being exploited and intimidated by someone in a position of power. The fact that you documented everything shows remarkable courage and foresight. She paused, then continued. However, I do have some advice for you. Ms. Hartley's attorney is likely to argue that you were involved in a conspiracy against her. You should probably get legal representation, just to be safe. My heart sank. Even with Celine arrested, she was still finding ways to hurt me. I was leaving the FBI office when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Elena Martinez? The voice was warm and professional. Yes? This is Patricia Westmore. I'm Rebecca's mother and the CEO of Westmore Tech. I was at the gala last night. I remembered her. A sophisticated woman in her 50s who'd been sitting at the head table with the other major donors. Ms. Westmore, I'm so sorry about what happened. I know this must have ruined your daughters. Elena, stop. You have nothing to apologize for. I'm calling because I want to offer you a job. I almost dropped the phone. I've been in business for 30 years, she continued. I know talent when I see it. I also know exploitation when I see it. That gala was absolutely beautiful, and I know you were responsible for every detail. How did you? I've done my research. I spoke with vendors, reviewed contracts, and looked at the planning documents. Your name is on everything, but Celine Hartley took credit for all of it. I felt tears pricking my eyes. I'm launching a new division focused on corporate events and social responsibility initiatives. I need someone who understands both the creative and logistical sides of event planning. Someone with integrity who won't steal from charities or exploit workers. I don't know what to say. Say yes. The salary is $75,000 to start, plus benefits, equity, and a team of your own. You'll have complete creative control and the resources to do things the right way. It was more money than I'd ever imagined making, and the chance to work for a company that actually valued ethics and employee welfare. Yes, I whispered. Yes, absolutely. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse watching Celine Hartley's trial. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case. Tax evasion, labor violations, wire fraud, and charity fraud. The evidence was devastating, particularly the recording from the gala where she'd confessed to everything while drunk on champagne and praise. Her defense attorney tried to paint her as the victim of a conspiracy, claiming that I had manipulated her and set her up. But the timeline didn't support that narrative. The investigation had begun long before I'd started documenting her crimes, and my evidence corroborated what the FBI had already discovered. When I testified, I told the truth about everything. The stolen credit, the exploitation of workers, the fake contracts, and the systematic abuse of anyone who couldn't fight back. Celine sat at the defense table in a simple gray suit, looking nothing like the glamorous socialite who'd once commanded every room she entered. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Celine Hartley was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution to the IRS, defrauded workers, and charities she'd stolen from. Her company was dissolved, her assets were seized, and her reputation was destroyed. But the real justice came in smaller moments. Maria Gonzalez got her legal status and now works for a catering company that pays fair wages and provides benefits. The other undocumented workers Celine had exploited were connected with legal aid organizations and worker advocacy groups. The vendors who'd been stiffed on payments were made whole through the restitution fund. The charities that had been defrauded received compensation and improved oversight procedures. And me? I was building something new. 2 years after the gala, I stood in the ballroom of the Beverly Hills Hotel, overseeing another charity event. But this time, I was the one giving interviews to reporters and accepting praise from guests. Elena Martinez, founder of Stellar Events, the reporter was saying, "You've built quite a reputation in just 2 years. What's your secret?" I smiled, thinking about how different this conversation was from the ones I'd watched Celine give. "I think the secret is treating people with respect," I said. "My team, my vendors, my clients. Everyone deserves to be valued for their contributions. When you create that kind of environment, amazing things happen." The reporter nodded, scribbling notes. "Your company is known for ethical practices and social responsibility. Is that a reaction to your experience with Celine Hartley?" "In part," I admitted. "But mostly it's just the right way to do business. Success built on exploitation isn't really success at all." As the interview wrapped up, I looked around the ballroom. My team was working smoothly, vendors were smiling and joking with each other, and guests were genuinely enjoying themselves. The charity we were supporting, a literacy program that actually used donations for their intended purpose, would receive every penny raised. This was what success looked like. That night, after the event ended and my team had gone home, I sat alone in my office reviewing the evening's success. We'd raised $400,000 for the literacy program, received glowing reviews from guests and media, and several new clients had already reached out about future events. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Saw the news coverage. You looked amazing. Celine must be rolling over in her prison cell." I smiled, but I realized I hadn't thought about Celine in months. Her shadow had loomed over me for so long, first as my abusive boss, then as the defendant in a trial that dominated my life. But now, she was just a cautionary tale about what happens when you mistake cruelty for strength. The truth was, I didn't need revenge. I never had. All I'd needed was the opportunity to show what I could do when I wasn't being undermined and exploited. The chance to build something positive instead of just surviving someone else's toxicity. Karma hadn't just punished Celine. It had liberated me. I thought about that night at the gala, standing in the hallway in my staff uniform, watching federal agents prepare to arrest my boss. I'd been terrified, humiliated, and convinced my career was over. But sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually doorways to the best ones. Celine thought she was untouchable. She thought her wealth and connections made her immune to consequences. She thought she could hurt people without it ever coming back to haunt her. She was wrong about all of it. And me? I'd learned that you don't have to choose between success and integrity. You can build something beautiful without tearing other people down. You can be powerful without being cruel. The next time someone tries to break you down in public, remember this story. Remember that karma isn't just about punishment, it's about justice. And sometimes, justice looks like watching your abuser get arrested while you go on to build the life you always deserved. You don't need revenge. You just need the truth, the right moment, and the courage to keep going when everything seems hopeless. Karma will handle the rest.